Oh yeah, by the way, I got this and it's changing my life.
Are you a Visco girl now?
It's look, it's just a functional item, okay?
What brand of Nalgene is that?
I don't know, Hydro Flask.
It's literally a Hydro Flask.
I don't know what that implies, okay? I don't know what that I don't know the valences of the various water bottle brands.
Wait, Virgil, we came into this like, oh, I'm going to explain NFTs to Brianna, but now we're explaining what a Visco girl is to Virgil.
No, this is good. When you and I learn, the audience learns. I know what a Visco girl is, okay?
Okay.
I just don't know why this makes me one.
Well, what do you think a Visco girl is?
It's I mean, like Visco was like Microsoft's competitor to Instagram, and there's a certain type of person. There's like a personality type that's been given that name.
And what is associated with that person to you, if not a Hydro Flask?
I mean, God, it's just like like a basic white person, I guess.
No, it's specific. It's a Zennial who dresses very normcore and like oversized T-shirts with like
that's what I mean
Frank
by basic.
logos or whatever, and scrunch. But it's not just basic, right? Because
it's a type of basic,
it's
right?
Items. It's like flavored chapstick that an 8-year-old would wear, scrunchies around your wrist, and in your straight floppity and a bun on the top of your head hair, and it's the Hydro Flask. And I think they also care about the environment. Oh, here we go.
Hi, you must be new.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this is a new Hydro Flask. Oh, you don't have one?
Oh,
how do you make
Jesus
your
Christ.
friendship bracelets then? That's kind of weird. Well, save the turtles.
I didn't know that this item. I would not have gotten it if I'd known this, because now I'll be lampooned.
There's nothing wrong with a Hydro Flask. It's just hilarious.
It's very efficient. It keeps the water cold.
That's what I've heard.
And it's very efficient to drink out of it.
And oop.
It's okay. I'm not making little noises when I do it. Okay, so this is just an efficient object, so I'm not, getting up every freaking 10 minutes to refill a glass of water. Like, no, I just pour it all in here, especially because, our recordings, they can go long, and it's like, I don't want to be like, can everyone, hold up the whole thing so I can, get another, 8 ounces of water.
I do not know why this is so funny to me, but it's really funny to me.
Great, I'm a Visco. All right, whatever. All right, whatever. Well, that's good. And we're appealing to, other audiences that might not otherwise watch this show.
I'm sorry. Cool. I don't know why it's so funny to me. Okay, I'm fine.
Okay, let's start the show. Now that we're all hydrated here, I don't know, what are you drinking out of?
Typically, I washed it today because it was getting stained green because I've been drinking a lot of chlorophyll. But I tend to drink out of a large mason jar, or in the alternative.
I've never seen this.
You've never? I was sipping out of it. Well, right now I just have a glass, but I use my giant straw here. See how it's green from chlorophyll? And a big, like enormous mason jar. If I drink 3 of them a day, it's like my full daily quotient. But that's because I'm home. When I used to work, not at home, I have this. Actually, let me just get it because it's cute and people like it.
Okay. The reason why I say that is because I feel like you're drinking surreptitiously. Like that's something you don't want to show the audience, whereas I don't care.
Okay. This is the mason jar. Giant ball jar.
Oh, okay. I have seen that. Yeah. But like off camera.
Yeah. And this is what I used to have at the office place. It's an embarrassly overpriced brand called BKR that were very trendy a couple of years ago.
What? Is that a, what's that fruit called?
Durian fruit.
Yeah, is that a durian?
No.
Why does it have anti-homeless spikes all over it?
So they're soft.
Yeah, show that up. Hold that up.
They're soft. They're rubbery. So they're not actually, you could actually sleep on it. It would probably be a nice experience. But they don't all have spikes. They have versions that are smooth. But this is such a big bottle that I like to have the grip, and it's heavy because it's glass.
It's so you don't drop the bottle.
I mean, that's why I picked the one with spikes. I thought it was cool.
That's the premise. It's like, it's like the mats you put in the shower so you don't slip and fall.
No, the premise is the stupidest thing, right? Because they're glass. I bought it because I wanted a 1 liter glass bottle so I could track how much I was drinking. And I didn't want, glass is better for environmental reasons and BPAs, or they called BHAs, whatever they are, the chemicals that are in plastics and all this stuff. So I was on the hunt for a big glass bottle, and this just happened to be the only liter-sized glass bottle I could find on the internet. But the reason they're popular, they got really popular among like yoga women, people with a lot of disposable income who also apparently drive everywhere because they're very heavy. It is not a light bottle. It's not the kind of thing you want to fill with water and put in your backpack. This is the biggest size. Obviously, there's smaller ones. I think they're popular with LA women who just drive to yoga and then carry their like $40 water bottle into the studio with them.
Yeah, and they're like constantly dropping it. It's a lot of money to pay just to replace that item.
Ironically, if you want to purchase just the glass insert, it's only like $15. But you can't repurchase, you can't purchase the sleeve separately. So you have to do the initial outlay that's expensive.
Oh, that's how they get you.
Yeah. Also, it's been very durable. I had another big glass bottle that broke, which is why I had to shop for this one. So it's been worth the money for what it's worth. And I'm very hydrated.
That's another installment of bad faith, purchasing decisions. Get the Hydro Flask, get whatever the hell Bree has. And it's going to improve your life. I mean, moving on if you like. Okay, one of the things I've long been promising on this show was to explain what an NFT is to Brianna. Because this is another one of those things where, and this has really, I don't know, this really seems to have taken off in the past year. Just the multiplication of get-rich-quick schemes that people are engaged in. Whether that's you saw it in GameStop, right? Mm-hmm. Where a lot of people thought, unsophisticated investors got in there and they were left holding the bag. But you see it especially with cryptocurrencies right now. Obviously our audience is, they want stock tips. They want to know how to get rich, much like everyone. And, the latest one is NFTs. I
have a lot of questions, Virgil, about this. I have listened to several other podcasts do explainers, and I still have no idea what they were talking about because I felt like some very, really fundamental questions weren't asked. So I'm just warning you.
You're saying the Pod Save boys didn't do a good job of explaining
it was actually leftists, all leftists talking about NFTs, the ones that I'm referencing. If you really want to do this, I'm ready to do this.
I'm ready to do it.
But I'm going to have some questions for you that might take a little bit of time.
I mean, I will answer all the questions. Some of the answers might be lies, but I'm very game to answer the questions.
Then I tried. You heard me try.
Because ultimately, I think, I'm like, our show, thanks to the patronage of our audience, our show does very well. We can pay for what we need to do here. We can make a lot of wonderful content. I'm going to get a light soon. So, like, we're doing great. But what if we were an NFT? And we sold it for $50 million. That's just something you can do with NFTs.
Okay. So, what's an NFT?
Okay. It stands for non-fungible token.
Right.
Well, the thing is, I don't know where to start.
Well, here's my problem. Okay. I've heard people explain it's a non-fungible token. That means it can't be exchanged one for one. It's non-fungible. It's not like a dollar. If I have a dollar and you have a dollar, we can exchange dollars and they're both worth the exact same thing. It's fungible. Non-fungible means they're unique. So I have not this BKR bottle because there are others like it in the world, but let's say I do a Banksy on it and it's like special and unique and an art object. It's irreplaceable. I can't just swap it for whatever wonderful art framed tiger print or whatever is in your house. It's non-fungible. That does not explain to me why the thing has value, because there's a lot of unique crap in the world that doesn't have any intrinsic value, nor does the fact, as I understand it, it is difficult to make these things through a complex technical process that I hope that you can shed some light on.
It's not actually difficult from the end user's perspective, from the actual artist's perspective. The technical details aren't really necessary to go that deep into it. Like, there's ones and zeros involved, I'm pretty sure.
But my question is, just because there's a process to make something also doesn't mean it necessarily has value. It's not like, it's a diamond and it was like in the earth for 1 million years, so that's why it's valuable, because it's rare.
In essence, what NFTs do is they use blockchain technology to create authentic originals of digital art.
Okay, but what's a blockchain?
Okay, see, that's why I asked the question of where I need to start.
Yeah, because everyone I've heard people say that line like 3 times on podcasts. It's like, what the hell is a blockchain?
Okay, think of the blockchain like this, and like this is the technology that underpins Bitcoin, and what Bitcoin as conceptually kind of
really
became the
understand
proof of
that
concept for it. Okay, well, blockchain is the core idea. It's basically, in the context of a cryptocurrency, it's basically a distributed ledger.
Those are just words.
Okay.
I know what distributed means. I know what a ledger is.
Okay, imagine this. Okay, like forget about computers for a second. Imagine banks don't have computers, and like, so how do they keep track of who has what?
Abacus.
Right? They have a ledger. They write it down, and that ledger could say record every time that you withdrew money from the bank or you wired money to someone, whatever. It's just just basic accounting stuff. Now imagine if
like Twin Peaks. Oh, you haven't seen Twin Peaks? There's a whole thing with the ledger switcheroo.
I stopped watching at some point.
Mm-hmm. That's why.
But okay.
Sorry, continue.
I know why. Well, I mean, I don't want to admit that on the show, or else Lynch
Exactly.
be mad at me. I don't know why you're trying to get me in their crosshairs here. Okay, so imagine if there was one big ledger that recorded everyone's transactions, right? And that always said who had what at all the times, and that you don't need the bank for that because everyone keeps an instant copy of that ledger. Mm-hmm. Like every single person just has, a magic copy of it. Mm-hmm. That's basically what blockchain does.
So it's just like a Google shared Excel sheet.
You can think of it that way, kind of. I mean, there's other technical details that, I don't really think it's necessary to go that deep into it. But the idea is that there's no central authority that's governing the transactions or recording the transactions or anything. It's just a system that's been implemented. And no person can just, come up and screw with it and just by writing a ledger that says, I got $1 billion because of the way that the technology manages to verify the authenticity of every transaction. So that's a blockchain in essence.
Okay.
So what's interesting about that is you can use that technology to do things that are not just cryptocurrency. And that's where NFTs come into play. It uses the blockchain technology to authenticate original works of digital art. Thinking of it this way, like if your work of digital art is, I don't know, it's like
Nyan Cat.
Fine, Nyan Cat. I was going in an awful direction with it, but it's Nyan Cat, right? And everyone can post that. Everyone can have like a picked copy of it on their phone. Well, imagine if there's just one original, and that it's a provable original, say, with like a certificate of authenticity or whatever. Then every copy of it becomes like a photograph of Starry Night, right? Mm-hmm. Well, there's one original one. And you can share it. You can have a freaking JPEG of it, but there's one original one, and it's worth a hell of a lot of money. So that's the idea. It's creating an entire market.
But here's the issue: Starry Night isn't worth a hell of a lot of money because it's original. For one, I don't really think it was worth a hell of a lot of money, like in Van Gogh's lifetime. Which bummer.
But no, he was very broke in his lifetime.
Ultimately, it's considered valuable because society decided it was a piece of high art that was part of a new aesthetic movement, and we like it. It has artistic intrinsic value. Nyan Cat or whatever JPEG someone comes up with, I'm struggling to understand why we decide one of these random digital objects is valuable just because it's unique.
I mean, that goes to a longer conversation about value. I mean, for one, I don't think that something like Starry Night has an inherent monetary value.
No, but it does have this cultural value that is built on.
I think it has an infinite cultural value. Certainly, yes.
Right. That comes from centuries of art history and a whole economy of art buyers and gallerists and patrons, and it doesn't make it. It's somewhat random, but there's something there. People decided.
My point is, art is worth what art is worth, basically arbitrarily, as a production of this industry where everyone has a stake in pretending that art is worth a certain amount. Also because of art speculators and the various, billion-dollar money laundering schemes that constitute the entire art market.
So who are the people who are creating the market for these things? Who are the JPEG evaluators who are deciding what each of these random digital objects is worth?
Well, first off, it is simply decided by market forces. Because when you create an NFT, you auction it off. And you can, so you sell it to someone and then they can resell it, whatever. There's only one. In many ways, like this the value of this is arbitrary.
Is there aesthetic value? Like, do these things actually look like something?
I mean, yeah, they look like something. They sound like something. You could have like an MP3, like an audio file. You can have a video. You can have an image. I mean, it's the digital media that you and I consume every day.
But is the value of the thing, does it bear any relationship to its artistic value? Like, you might not like a Kuntz or whatever, but
no, I do not.
It's aesthetic. A giant balloon, the materials took cost to make it was difficult. There's a certain level of technical proficiency. I might not like the giant dog balloon, but I can't make it. It's hard to recreate. It takes resources and a certain ability, technical skill with materials.
I can't make Freddy Got Fingered, but I don't think it's worth $1 billion.
But it is.
So this sold for $68 million.
Yeah, this sucks, man. This looks like a Bob. This looks like a bad Bob Close painting.
It looks like shit. Yeah, I agree.
It's literally just a bunch. It just looks like a bunch of internet. Like, if I did a Google search on something that's like not very specific, like animal, and then took every image that came up when I Googled animal, shrunk them down really tiny, and just hodgepodge them all together into a collage. And that's what this is.
I agree with you. And, again, like my point, and getting away from the traditional art world is that like there is no objective value to these things. And that's one of the criticisms of NFTs, which blown up in recent weeks, is that like this is fundamentally just speculation.
Yeah.
And this is, this is a bubble. This is meant to reel in suckers. I mean, I presume that there are actual sincere collectors of digital art here who actually do appreciate and admire this idea and have basically the desires that rich people have to just own a unique thing. You know what I mean?
But it's not like you can even
to be able to say,
it.
I've got the original thing. Yeah, that's another aspect to it. It's like, yeah, you can't like decorate your house with it unless, I don't know, you got an iPad or something. All it is just proof that you own the original. That's all it is.
And because of the nature of digital objects, me displaying, I can have the original, but for anyone to see that I have the original, I have to display it, project it within some device like a screen or an iPad or whatever, at which point it is indistinguishable from everybody's copy, which is also projected on the. So like there's a Vermeer where I can get up close and see the paint strokes and whatnot.
Well, would you understand a very rich person buying a piece of stolen artwork, knowing that it's stolen?
Well, yeah, because they show it to all their criminal friends when they come over for dinner.
You do not show it to anyone.
Yes, that's what they do.
Then you do not show it to anyone because then it gets seized.
You know when you watch Billions, right?
I do not watch Billions.
Okay. Do you watch the other one, Succession?
I do watch Succession, yeah.
Okay. Obviously, when the dad, whose name I don't remember anymore.
Logan Roy.
I'm sure he has a lot of stolen art somewhere. He invites his dumb, rich, evil friends over and he says, "Hey, Perry, I got something to show you." And they go into the room behind the secret door to the wine cellar. And that's where he has all his Nazi art. Like that's how rich people roll.
That's a bad idea.
But that's what they do. They have that
just like
stuff.
Get drunk and get someone over and it's like, "Hey man, let me show you this."
You show the other evil people who are similarly implicated because when you were over their house, they showed you their stolen art from Iran or whatever. Like it's all
I can't speak to how rich sickos act with their rich sicko pals. I do not know enough about it. This is not. There are many podcasts that deal with these exact issues, such as TrueAnon.
Well, that's who I was listening to. That was one of the NFT conversations I was listening to.
That's pretty much outside my ambit. I have to imagine some people with stolen art act like that, and some people with stolen art would spend, $40 million on a famously stolen artwork and never show it to anyone, and just live with the knowledge that they own a unique thing because the super rich are driven by pathologies that you and I just simply cannot relate to. But anyway, going back to NFTs, I mean, like I said, it's comparable to the art market in that way, in which, some super rich people would pay $40 million for that piece of shit that Ben just showed us. Other people are paying for it because they think that there's another sucker down the line and that this bubble is just going to keep getting bigger and bigger.
I mean, it's obvious where I'm stuck, and we don't have to stay stuck here with me. But I think this question of where value comes from, I mean, it's fundamental to the whole thing, right? And it was fundamental to the whole GameStop thing too, and anything that's speculative in this nature. And what's funny is that in a lot of ways, investments in art are considered to be some of the safer investments.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. There's this idea that
it's art and in a condo in Manhattan.
I keep trying to tell
below
my mom,
96th Street.
I don't know about newer art. I think that that's probably more speculative. But at least when you're talking about classics, like none of us can imagine a world where there's not going to be a broadly held artistic or cultural commitment to the essential value of a painting by an old master. Like we're never, a million years from now, 200, 300, 400, 500 years from now, the Mona Lisa is not going to stop being valuable. The water lilies are never going to stop being valuable.
You mean like with monetary value specifically?
Yes, because the markets are what they are. They're all in the art history books. We've decided that these masters were important. They're historical figures now that brought about new movements and shifts in how we understand art. And that is irreplaceable.
Yeah, there's not yet been a crash in the art market.
And because of how the value of art is socially constructed, it's difficult to imagine there ever would be, right? Mm-hmm. Like you could maybe hypothetically think, okay, let's say we 1619 Project out. This is like the worst fears of the like kind of reactionary white right, where we radically change our value system as a society and say, actually, the old masters weren't that great.
We cancel the old masters.
Look at all this other kind of art that was going on. Okay, like all of those like late 19th century artists, those Frenchy Frenches, they were just stealing from a bunch of Japanese artists anyway. And or African masks, Picasso, blah, blah, blah. Screw them. We're going to just put value in the original products and devalue Picasso. We're going to cancel Picasso and go gaff or run around with those Tahitian miners, all of that. And so nobody wants to touch a Gauguin anymore because it's just too toxic.
Yeah.
And what we do is we just go to Senegal and find the masks, and that suddenly is what has all this value. Like I can imagine hypothetically all of that happening, but it's just so far-fetched because of how deeply ingrained that value is in our culture.
And because super rich people do not give a shit about being canceled. I mean, if you hung out on Jeffrey Epstein's private island, I don't think you're gonna give a shit what some woke liberal arts student thinks about your art.
Right.
But right. I do agree with you. We should invest in African masks.
Yes, I mean this is it's actually interesting because I've been in museums before and walked through the ethnic bits. You're in the Met, and most people make the beeline for the Impressionist room, but you're walking through the like Asia Oceanic.
I'm always going to the mummies.
Okay,
it's like right off the bat, just mummies.
But
let's see them.
There are the parts with African masks, and I remember having this thought like I have felt inadequate at times in assessing the value of objects like that as compared to objects that are very culturally familiar to me because of what we learn about in school. And it's like, I grew up in Africa. I've seen a million masks. And I remember having the thought, well, how do I know that this mask is like high art and a good mask and a unique mask or an old mask as compared to the mask that's like hanging in my living room at home? That is more about our own culture's unwillingness to like educate us and think that those kinds of objects are important enough to learn about and distinguish and to be able to appreciate a certain kind of talent and craft. And so maybe I'm making the case right now for why we shouldn't be so flippant about NFTs, because maybe it's worth expanding culturally how we perceive value outside of a narrow, Eurocentric, largely 19th century lens.
So there's a lot of pessimists and skeptics of NFT, but I'm actually very amenable to that point that you just made. I can see ultimately the value of this system, and particularly in the way that it could benefit digital artists who are, just trying to eat, just trying to make a living, where that's really fucking hard to do if you're a digital artist. I mean that goes for, the non-digital art certainly as well. So, I mean, I don't think this is something that just has to exist to be the, to be a speculative instrument or to be the plaything of the, deranged ultra rich. I mean, I do think that one thing it exposes is that rich people just have too much freaking money if they're going to spend $40 million for that piece of shit that Ben just showed us. But as long as, at the root of this is an artist getting a lot of money that they would not otherwise get, I mean, that's not something I'm going to object to in the short term, irrespective of my views about the value of art and decommodification of art.
Yeah, on one hand, I mean, obviously, if the people are making stuff that is of some aesthetic value, whatever that means, and they have rich people who are willing to pay for it, like, kudos, great. Also, let me get in on this.
Yeah, not everyone can. Right, exactly. Not everyone can have a successful Patreon where you're just like straight up funded by a large audience of people paying us, each person chipping in a small amount of money each month. But yes, I agree. We should get into this. So here's my proposal.
Oh, okay.
I think we should clip this section and sell it as an NFT.
What makes that unique?
Because it's the original.
That's part of the issue. Like, how do you tell if a digital object is an original object?
That's what the blockchain does. It verifies that authenticity. So
How?
Theoretically, everyone just agrees that that's the case. That's the basic idea. Everyone would have to buy into this idea that that's the blockchain that proves that authenticity.
Isn't this like when Skrelly or whatever bought the Wu-Tang album?
It is. That's a pretty good example.
And wasn't that like silly?
It is silly, but the difference there is, I do think like they were selling that one album as an artistic statement, which I find interesting. But the big difference is a guy like Skrelly, buys that album and then can decide not to release it.
Oh, it wasn't an album. It wasn't an album that was out. It was a secret album.
Yes, it was an album. They pressed exactly one copy and they sold it. And they were like, well, whoever buys it, like they can decide to release it to the public or they can just keep it.
Oh, well, that's less silly. That's actually an original product because it's not
that's a
everywhere.
fascinating. That's why it's a fascinating idea.
But this isn't bad.
It gets silly because of the fact it's freaking Martin Shkreli who bought it.
Yeah, this is kind of
like, here's what this is kind of akin to.
Okay.
This is like selling the master tape of an album, right? Like
Yes.
you have a master CD that you produce, and then that goes into production, and you just like run a bunch of copies of it, and the copies are identical. But there is still only one master, correct?
Yes. Well, I would say to that there is a part of the value of the master is, I think, the presumption or the understanding that every copy is slightly diminished, even if imperceptibly to most people, right? Like every time you cut a record, I think it also wears on the master. I don't know. Maybe I don't know the science of records.
I'm sure that's the case, though. I figure that once it got to the point of digital media, that became less relevant.
Well, that's my point. Like I can understand why. Well, let's take Potter's casts are the same way, or like what's his face? Degas made a bunch of those like brass ballerinas, right? Like the sculptures, little sculpture ballerina girls. There's like a handful of them. I remember,
Yeah.
And I think they all came from the same cast, like clay cast or whatever you used to cast bronze in. You make the clay sculpture and then you cover in some kind of putty thing and then you melt the inside out and then you pour the bronze in. Like that's how you make things. The original, I would presume, if it exists somewhere, is enormously valuable because it's the thing that enabled all of these statues to be made that are themselves valuable. And you could conceivably make more to the end of all time. And it's valuable because, Degas' hands were on it. It's this artifact. It's fragile in a way that the statues themselves aren't because they're made of bronze and this thing is probably made of some kind of softer clay material. It's putty. It's like, it's a historical object. It is delicate. Like I can see a million ways why that would have value. I'm just really struggling. A digital object, you don't even know it's an original except this random technology told you it was. There's nothing about it.
It has to, so for all of this to work, there has to be a community of trust where we all agree of like what you just said. We all accept that.
Even if it is the first, I don't care.
Well, that's why you're not buying NFT. I don't give a shit either. I think it's weird. I'm not going to spend my money on that shit.
That's not quite what I'm saying. I'm saying that even if I think Skrelly is silly for spending money in a way that I wouldn't spend money, or even if I think I personally wouldn't spend money on the cast for Degas Ballerina Girl, I understand the value of it as a historical artifact, as a thing that can be used to, technically, it's a thing with a purpose that can be used to make statues. It's a thing that has value, has art value, has historical value, has technical value.
I see.
The NFT, its firstness is completely constructed, on top of which it has no utility. And because it can be so easily and immediately reproduced, it's, as much as you want to say it's non-fungible, it's obviously fungible in the way that everything digital is fungible, is replicable.
Well, get away from the idea of non-fungible. That's not specifically what that refers to. I mean, the name NFT, I find it very misleading. But you grasp the main idea. I think you're speaking to a core issue in the which is how is value determined?
Yes.
Which is not, a lot of people have been asking that question for a lot of centuries.
This is why it's the GameStop thing. And this is what I'm saying.
And you're someone who's proposing that, okay, well, there are objective sources of value. There's use value.
Yeah.
There is a specific cultural value that may be hard to translate into dollar terms.
Yes.
That there is an objective value to art. My responses to all of those things would be, I agree in broad strokes with what you're saying. I don't necessarily agree that there is a fungibility between, say, an ineffable work of art and the experience that it produces and, dollar sign, dollar sign, dollar sign.
Sure.
That being said, the reason why NFTs are worth what they're worth is because fucking rich people say that. That's it. Why is money worth what it's worth? It's made up. It's fake.
Here's what I've concluded after this stimulating conversation, which I have genuinely enjoyed a great deal.
It was good. I thought it'd be sloppier. It was good.
It feels like all of the discourse around NFT is calculated to make us all believe that NFTs have value, and this is all a pyramid scheme for the rich people who are buying NFTs. We're getting these articles written up in Bloomberg and Vox or whatever, and that we are basically printing rich people money by having this conversation about NFTs.
If you buy a piece of digital artwork for $40 million, that means someone with $41 million will need to be willing to buy it in order for you to realize any profit on that investment, which means, if you want to trick, Elon Musk into spending $1 billion on digital art, I don't care.
But there's always the dumbest person with the most money somewhere who just wants to do it for the story. This is the problem with the uber rich people, right? At a certain point, it's not about whether or not they actually even think it's a return on their investment. They just get to hang the freaking Caravaggio in their living room, and that's just it. They don't ever plan to sell it. It's, conspicuous consumerism.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of the people who are buying these are not like what you would think of as traditionally rich people. They are recently minted crypto millionaires who are channeling their enthusiasm for this technology into just another the hottest trend or cutting edge as they see it.
Okay, I don't know what cryptocurrency is either, but we obviously don't have time to get into it.
I think you already have the pieces right there. But that's exactly it. And that's why NFTs, should, at least in the short term, be viewed through the lens of this cryptocurrency asset bubble and, frankly, the stock market asset bubble as well. It's a lot of speculation, which is why I would not advise the audience to go out and speculate on NFTs. This is not investment advice. Just, clear that, so the FEC doesn't bang down our freaking door, or the SEC doesn't bang down our freaking door. But I don't know if you want to spend $10 on a JPEG of, Hank and Boomhauer having sex with each other, go nuts, have fun. But that being said, I think and also the fact that it's, cryptocurrency and all this shit is pretty much destroying the environment, and increasing emissions.
That. I've heard it, but I don't understand.
Because it takes up, this is an important point, and I don't want to be too glib about it, because this is part of, I think, the critique and the hostility that I see from a lot of people on the left is that, hey, this is using up a shitload of energy and it's creating a shitload of emissions. Because I'm going to try to explain this as simply as possible.
I'm not dumb. The stuff just doesn't make any sense.
I know. It's kind of weird. There might be a point where I just want to say, we'll just take that at face value.
I feel like that's what everyone's doing, which is why I can listen to 3 podcasts about this and still not.
I can explain this. I'm just kind of collecting my thoughts for a second.
All right.
So, let's talk about Bitcoin for a second, right? It's like that ledger we were talking about, that blockchain ledger, right? That's really all it is. But there is a finite number of them, and they are produced through a process called minting. Minting basically means making your computer do busy work. You force a computer to basically solve math problems, to do freaking Sudokus. If they solve enough of the math problems, then they mint a Bitcoin. And then you own that. That's the basic system. And there's other aspects to it. And like that system, the thing has to exist because that's part of what keeps the whole network up, is like people minting the Bitcoins. Because, this all like for like a distributed ledger like this to exist, that's going to record every single transaction. And we're talking like, millions and millions of transactions probably every minute or so. For that to work, you're going to need a bunch of computers, actually running these operations, actually, keeping the ledger. The way Bitcoin is designed is that there's a hard cap on how many Bitcoins can be produced.
And are Bitcoins ever taken out of circulation?
No, they're not. There's always going to be eventually there's going to reach a point where the last Bitcoin is mined. And then
how did they decide that?
Something like 9 million. The cap was basically kind of chosen kind of arbitrarily.
By whom?
Satoshi Nakamoto.
Yeah.
By whom
By
now?
Satoshi. He was the inventor of Bitcoin. But there are other cryptocurrencies that have like a bigger cap. Whatever. That's not that important to know. I mean, you just need to know like those are just the facts of the matter.
There's another episode where I have a lot of questions about how this fellow got people to invest in the idea that this digital object that he created had value as a currency. But I'm willing to move on at this point.
The way that it's designed is that the first few Bitcoins, like your computer, you run a program, like it could mint them in like a second. It gets harder to mint them as time goes on, and it requires more processing power, which will in turn require more energy consumption. And to mine a Bitcoin right now takes a shitload of energy.
But not all energy comes at a consequence to the environment, right? You could just build a giant solar panel and say, I have solar produced Bitcoins, don't at me. No?
Yeah. No, I absolutely
These are my hydro
with you.
Bitcoins.
I agree with you. And I think that has to be a nuance in the debate about climate change and as it pertains
clean
to
coal
cryptocurrencies.
Bitcoins.
Yeah, with cryptocurrencies, right? Because I mean, the fundamental problem isn't that it's using a lot of energy that's creating emissions. The problem is that our entire global energy infrastructure
it's arbitrary
is built on
on
carbon consumption,
right?
Which is bad, especially when you consider we actually have the capital and labor and technology to create a like purely zero emission global economy.
Complaining about Bitcoin fumes while eating my juicy Angus beef burger.
Yeah, basically. So, I do want to give a nod to that because, right now, there is something very appalling. I saw a guy who constructed a natural gas derrick, which connects to a shipping container full of graphics cards, computer processors. And that entire system, that filthy, emissions system, like all exists so that this fuckface can mint a Bitcoin.
Yeah, frack that
Which,
guy.
of course, that's the kind of appalling kind of consumption that certainly has no social value. But the overall idea of, okay, well, the blockchains can be really useful. There are other purposes besides, just having creeps like Martin Shkreli get really rich. They can have uses beyond just speculation. I think that's very true. And I'm not going to, I wouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater on it, even if a lot of the people engaged in it are, huge dipshits.
Yeah. I mean, the part of this that's most interesting to me, I guess, and what I'd like to know more about is what this digital art is like. And I think not just as a joke, to be honest, but because I think it would help me to understand and maybe be a fruitful avenue for artistic exploration.
So you want to go buy an NFT with me?
No, I want to make an NFT with you.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think we should. I don't know if there's like a hard cap on. I have not made one, and I don't know if there's a hard cap on how long a video can be. I know you can do videos with them, maybe just MP3s. Maybe that'd be easier. I think we should clip this section of the show as an experiment. This is Bad Faith Science Corner. We're going to clip this whole conversation that we just had about NFTs, and it's a very good conversation.
I enjoyed it.
And we're going to put it on the auction block. and say, if you want to own a Bad Faith original, an original from the Bad Masters, from Virgil, Bree, and Ben, place your bids. I want to just set the reserve at $1 and just see what happens. Another interesting wrinkle is when you set the reserve and someone meets the reserve.
I'm sorry, what does that mean to set the reserve?
It's like, I'm sorry, reserve is the wrong term here. It's like setting the beginning price of the auction. So we put it it's like auctioning for something for blank price. Once somebody actually meets that price with an opening bid, and this is arbitrary as well, then that auction goes for 24 hours. So I want to say to the audience right now, faithful, sorry, I know. That's now I'm nervous because this is going to be in an NFT. It's going to be it's going to exist forever on the blockchain. I want to say the faithful, look out for the Bad Faith NFT auction. Don't get mad at us because we said all this stuff about climate change. We know about the climate change stuff, so do not get mad about it. Okay?
Yeah, this is cool. I'm into it.
I told you it would be a good conversation.
When I imagined our NFT, I was thinking visual, not I mean, I understand the video is visual, but I was thinking like a static image. And for whatever reason, the image that sprung to my mind was our logo, but with us like baby pictures, like looking off into the distance like this.
Like what?
Like a baby, like Virgil at 3.
Like what's her name does the weird photograph, Ann Geddes?
I mean, sort of, but I wasn't imagined as like snuggled in a pumpkin. I was imagining us like in pink and blue, like on our cover image, and like just to find a childhood image of yourself where you're kind of in 3/4 profile, and we'll just Photoshop it together. And in my head, that was a kind of iconic image that the people really needed. Also, I just want to see a baby picture of Virgil.
Okay, this is not going in the NFT. I'm just calling it right now. Like that part is not going in the NFT.
Come on, Virgil. Why don't you want me to be happy?
Well, you know what? We'll see how this one NFT goes, and then we can talk about it later.
All right.
I don't know. Maybe we'll make $20 million. We'll see.
That'd be cool.
It also would be funny if somebody bought it for like our NFT for $100, and then through a process of speculation, it became worth $20 million.
That would be less cool.
Then Martin Shkreli just owns it.
I mean, that's a story. If Bloomberg writes up something about bad faith because Martin Shkreli buys our NFT, that's a net win for us.
Let's do it. Let's be the first NFT podcast NFT.
Let's do it. Let's get it on Wiki. Also, let's get us the Wiki page.
I didn't say that. You said it. But I can see the value of it.
Unlike NFTs.
I can see it being notable. Well, there you have it. There's, that's Bad Faith Science Chat for the day. Why don't we meet our panelists? It's been a while.
All right. Yeah, let's meet our panelists.
Pores. I'm back with more shiny crumbs for you. Well, you did it. You got your $15 an hour. It's that thing you've been asking for 10 years, and now you finally have it 5 years from now. Just think, in 1 hour, you'll make $15 whole before tax. Okay, Mr. Moneybags, look at you running around above the poverty line. God, there's so many things you can buy with $15. You can buy 4/5 of a Los Angeles restaurant hamburger before tip. Treat yourself to a couple gallons of the lowest tier gasoline. You can buy 3 hours of parking at the Santa Monica Pier or 2 hours of parking at your local hospital.
Let's meet our guests. She is a comedian from UCB, Kylie Brakeman.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
He is alderman for Chicago's 35th Ward. He was the Illinois vice chair for Bernie Sanders' 2020 campaign, Carlos Ramirez Rosa.
Hey, everybody.
Both making their first appearances on the Bad Faith program. It's only 2 today. We were going to have 3, but it turned out to be 2.
Virgil, we keep going back and forth about this because my philosophy is that while as human beings, our brains are oriented to wanting things to come in threes, that panels work better when there's actually just 2 people because there's 2 of us also.
Well, that adds up to 4, so that's my brain doesn't like that.
Right, but the point is that there's a lot of people, there's a lot of personalities, there's a lot of things to get on the table. And sometimes, I want both of these guests to have an opportunity to shine, especially since I've followed both of you on Twitter for a long time for different reasons. And Kylie, I gotta confess, I'm extremely excited to finally meet you.
It's so
Not
good to
in
meet
the flesh,
you.
but because you burst onto the scene at a moment when a lot of folks were afraid that comedy was dead because Joe Biden was in office and there was nothing to laugh about. There was no edge left anymore, and the liberals didn't know what to do with Joe Biden as a foil.
No, because now we're in a utopian society and everything's perfect. So what is there to make fun of? Everything's great.
Exactly. So for people who don't know, you are able to, in these kind of like knitted together, I want to say like it's a TikTok style. I'm just going to say a bunch of words that make me sound 75.
TikTok jump cut. I don't know.
Jump cuts.
Yeah, she does the TikToks.
Front-facing jump cut artist, whatever, auteur, whatever you want to say.
She's the girl from the iPhone.
Exactly. I'm the girl who makes videos that look like FaceTime because people don't want to click on anything that has 3 camera setups. God forbid.
Right. So you're able to do that, and you are able to capture, I think, some of the inane liberal pablum that really finds its home where most like 30 and 40 something liberals live, which is also my home, Twitter.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't necessarily, not that I wasn't doing political stuff before this, but like I was mostly just focusing on like goofy stuff. I was in my own little bubble and I was just doing like really dumb characters. And then I think just being online 24/7 during lockdown, back when it was like a real lockdown, really just warped my brain. And all I could regurgitate was just things that happened on Twitter of like cringy things that people are posting. And so I think people responded to just the like, oh my God, we're all crazy portion of it.
Yeah. So you went from doing, I don't know what kind of characters to doing just Deborah Messing.
To just suddenly only blue check cringe just 24/7.
Well, what's the response been like?
I mean, I'll say this. Republicans never lash out at me because they don't find me. Every once in a while I look on a trending topic and I see tweets from them and I'm like, I've never seen any of these. I've never even encountered any of these opinions because we're so isolated. The only people who come for me are like centrists. And so it's been very interesting. I had one person do like a 200 tweets about me within a day. It was like nuts. She had feminist in her bio and everything. It was great. It was perfect.
What are they mad about?
It's hard to say exactly what they're mad about because most of what I'm saying, if you actually look at it, is nonsense. Like, it's not anything. It's not like I'm Nancy Pelosi and I'm blah, 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 blah. I mean, sometimes I do that, but mostly I'm just saying like this, brunch, blah, blah. It's just these words and they really get under people's skin. And like, there are a lot of like middle-aged women who are like, you shouldn't be making fun of women. You should be making fun of men. And I'm like, where did I specify that I was a woman? I simply am a woman. I don't know what you want me to do. We're now going full circle and we're saying women can't do comedy, which I love.
Yeah.
It boggles my mind, the various heuristics that people use to prevent themselves from enjoying anything at any time.
We're really at that point right now.
That's a new one to me. Like, you know, you got to make fun of men. Like, you cannot lampoon women.
And it's nuts. It's like, if we really want to have more women in comedy, we have to like have gross women characters on there. Like, do you want me to just portray every woman as Superwoman? That sucks.
Well, next time, just slap a mustache on your face before you do your next supercut.
We love that. We love that.
There's also something very funny about getting mad at one of your videos, which is just admitting, oh, I'm the person from the video.
Right.
Like, you got my number perfectly. Because if they were a little smarter, they'd be like, yeah, that's a good joke at the expense of someone who's not me.
It's very telling. It's very telling. I don't know. Like, if I were to make some video about, like, Rose Twitter or, like, socialist Twitter or something, I'm sure that everyone on the left would just be like, oh, cool, I hate myself too. Awesome. You got me.
Yeah, there's no jokes. I feel like every leftist podcast is just making fun of every other leftist podcast.
Well, yeah, basically, that's why the other people of other political orientations don't even need to work up the effort to like satirize the left. It's already doing it to itself.
Yeah,
nobody hates us more than us. Carlos, I want to ask both of you this question actually, because you're in different contexts. Obviously, Carlos, you're in actual political land. Kylie, you're in political parody land. But, when you are on the left, frankly, even a little bit, you do end up finding yourself fighting often more with the people who are your ideological peers, or at least ostensibly share your party broadly, than the far right. And I'm curious, Carlos, what's it been like for you engaging in more local politics as a Bernie bro?
You know what? I will say that I'm pleasantly surprised whenever people that I consider ultra leftists are like, we have to stop those ultra leftists that are ruining our campaign. And I'm like, all right, like, I don't know what this means in terms of where I stand on this spectrum. I will say that local politics is most definitely local. And so people very much consider me to be the far left of the Chicago City Council. For 4 years, my first term, I was the only Democratic Socialist on the City Council. We now have 6 self-identified Democratic Socialists, which, if you do the math, means the next election will have 36 in 2023 elected to the City Council. I think that when I speak to people, like, for example, my comrade Kashama Sawant on the Seattle City Council, the positions that she takes are much more far to the left if you compare to kind of where the political discourse is at in Chicago. It's really just a lesson that, a lot of these conversations are extremely local. Things that, pass for kind of mainstream liberal in Seattle or San Francisco or New York are oftentimes seen as very radical or extreme here in the city of Chicago.
How do you deal with that? Because, we just had an interview, I guess it was Monday's episode, Fast Premium episode. We were talking to some of the union members and Amazon workers who are organizing to be in a union down in Bessemer, Alabama. And I asked them, what do you make of all the kind of Team Bernie folks who've descended on Bessemer? Is it purely, I'm so glad people are here to help, and the Nina Turners of the world and the Cory Bushes of the world are here to bring attention to this issue, and we're so happy? Or is there any sense of carpetbagging or any skepticism? And does it resonate for people that a lot of the folks that are down there are Bernie bros? Danny Glover. Like, when I look with my biased Bernie eyes, I see just almost exclusively people from the left who identify as part of kind of the Bernie Democratic movement down there. And I was curious to see if they perceived it that way as well, and if that was a good thing or a bad thing. And, it was such a non-issue to them. They were just like, I'm happy for anybody to be down here supporting. And they did think that it was going to have like a radicalizing influence on the people that were participating in the movement. And so I wonder how you negotiate that dance between kind of leading with those kinds of, Sanders associations, which can go one way or another, when the message itself is popular, separate and apart from Bernie.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges is that the position of alderman is nonpartisan. So we don't have a Democratic primary election. In that Democratic primary, there are so many self-identified liberal or very liberal or progressive voters that I think in a lot of places it's easier to be associated with a Bernie-crat. In our non-primary municipal election, there are a lot of people that would be voting in the Republican primary, if we had one, who are showing up and voting in my election. And so my polling for my reelection showed that I had taken so many progressive stances that my ceiling was essentially 64% of the expected electorate in my district. Essentially, anyone that identified as moderate or conservative was just not going to vote for me. Now, if there was a separate Republican primary, those people that identified as moderate or conservative would vote in that primary. I would win the Democratic primary with 80% of the vote, and then I'd go on to win the general election as a Democrat, because Chicago is a Democratic town. And so I think the nonpartisan nature of our elections does mean that more conservative forces are overrepresented in our municipal elections. And I think that plays out with a lot of people being very angry about my association with Bernie Sanders, right? They're like, why are you talking about Bernie Sanders? Shut up. There's a pothole on my street. And then you have to go through the work of connecting the dots to say, look, there's austerity, there's divestment in our neighborhoods, there's corporate tax breaks. There are people that are dying in our community because they don't have health insurance. And so if I'm going to be a good representative for my community, if I'm going to get that pothole fixed, if I'm going to make sure that our senior down the block is getting the medicine that she needs, then it behooves all of us, and especially myself as a local leader, to get involved in national politics and fight for progressive champions like Bernie Sanders.
Chicago neighborhoods are, you might as well be describing Chechnya to me. I have no idea what any of the words mean. I can like name probably 15 Chicago neighborhoods, and I would not be able to explain to you where they are, what those words mean. but I've just heard them. What neighborhood do you represent?
So I represent the Northwest Side. If you've ever flown into O'Hare.
I'm already lost.
Yeah. So we have a lake. The lake is on the east, and we orient ourselves off of the lake. It's really easy.
Lake Michigan.
Yes. Once you know where Lake Michigan is.
Very confusing because it's in the state of Illinois,
Hey, it's a huge lake. I don't know if people realize that. This is not a little itty bitty lake. This is the largest freshwater resource in the world.
New York probably has bigger lakes, but go on.
No.
I'm learning a lot here. I'm learning a lot.
So basically, if you fly into O'Hare and you get on the Blue Line train, I'm halfway between O'Hare Airport, which is on the far northwest side of the city, and downtown. About 60,000 people in the district, about half of them or more Latino immigrant background, about a third or more white, and then folks from Asia, from all across the globe.
So how did you come to run for the city board of aldermen?
So I decided to run in 2014 because I was sick and tired of seeing a corporate neoliberal mayor, totally sell out our neighborhoods, basically sell the city to the highest bidder. Our local alderman was selling out our community to deep-pocketed developers because we have a system where local elected officials, our aldermen, make the decisions on zoning and land use. We saw a lot of displacement happening in our community, skyrocketing rent. So I started talking to neighbors and was like, hey, who's going to run for alderman? How can we change things up in City Hall? And finally, people were like, why don't you run? And I was 25 years old. So Kylie, you're 24, right? I think I heard you say earlier.
I am 20. The rumors are true.
No pressure, Kylie. Carlos said, make something of yourself.
I gotta get out there. I gotta get to work.
Hey, I'm pretty sure Kylie has more Twitter followers than me. So I think she's, she's the bigger success. That is the measure of success.
Of course.
But yeah, folks were like, hey, why don't you think about running? And we formed a committee of local residents. We started knocking on doors. And interestingly enough, this is sort of kind of when Bernie was sort of, I think, hinting at running for president. There was definitely a shift in the national politics around discourse. You had Bernie Sanders and folks like Elizabeth Warren talking about taxing the rich. So locally, I knocked on doors and said, we need to take on the big and powerful corporations at City Hall, and we need to make sure that our public dollars go to the public needs in our neighborhood. And took that message door to door and won with 67% of the vote.
For a while, you were the only socialist on the Chicago Board of Aldermen, and probably the first in decades?
The first in about 100 years. The last time we had a socialist was in 1915. And actually, Democrats and Republicans came together to run a hybrid candidate against him to unseat him.
Sounds familiar.
And since then, you brought 5 other socialists onto the Chicago Board of Aldermen, something like 10%.
Yeah. So we had a movement, and we've had a leftist movement in Chicago for many, many years that has increasingly looked to electoral politics as a way to push forward our movement demands. Through a coalition of progressive labor unions, community groups, as well as the Democratic Socialists of America, we were able to elect 6 DSA members to the city council in 2019.
And I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Virgil. You're on a roll.
Fuck no, I forgot it. No, I was gonna ask. Basically, I'm just trying to think of an articulate way to put this. How's it going? How's that been going?
I will say that 1 is a lonely number. I think that having 6 of us now, we're really a unit. We can work together. We can fight together. There's a lot more cooks in the kitchen, which means we can cook a lot more. And so whereas before, a lot of times movement organizations would turn to me and say, hey, we need you to file this bill. We need you to be our champion on this. And I'd say, I've got a full plate. I don't really have the capacity to take on this issue. Now they have other aldermen that they can turn to that can help lead on those things. So we're taking on things like climate change, affordable housing, progressive taxation, a whole host of issues that we can now pay attention to and lead on legislatively, whereas before we were a little hindered because there was only one alderman they could turn to.
Yeah, and something that we talk a lot about on this show is the consequences of the DSA electing, I believe, 4 socialists to the U.S. House of Representatives, and that's less than 1%, 10% is a much more consequential number. What practical effect has your voting bloc, your coalition had over negotiations over things like the Chicago city budget?
Yeah, well, we've definitely moved the conversation to the left. on a number of issues. We've been able to win important concessions. We've also been able to pass important ordinances. So for about 4 or 5 years, we had an ordinance that was stalled to completely end any collaboration between local police and immigration and customs enforcement. After the election of these additional socialists and some additional progressives, we were finally able to pass that. So in no case and no exception will Chicago police work with ICE to deport undocumented Chicagoans. We were also able to push forward a non-law enforcement mental health first responder. It's a lot of words, but essentially making sure that we have alternatives so that when people call 911 in their mental health crisis, a cop doesn't show up with a gun and then shoots them when what they really need is support and help in that moment. So the mayor was totally opposed to this. She said she only wanted a co-responder model where we send out police officers with mental health professionals. But all the data shows that what you really want to do is have a non-law enforcement approach. And so we were able to win a pilot in the 2021 budget to begin rolling out that program. In the end, we're only, 10% of the city council. So that does hinder kind of the concessions that we're able to win, but there's no question that we've totally changed the entire landscape and moved the conversation to the left. And I feel it myself, whereas before some of my colleagues were like, you're kind of saying things that are out there. It's helped bring our ideas into the mainstream, and it's become part of the discourse at City Hall and in city politics.
If memory serves, there was some controversy over, I believe it was the budget vote, that one member of the Socialist Caucus voted for it against the party line on that. Could you describe what that controversy was and what the consequences were?
Yeah, so the leftist movements in Chicago, including DSA, rejected Mayor Lightfoot's 2021 budget proposal as putting forward austerity, as being balanced on the backs of working families, as continuing to fund policing. So the demand was made that aldermen vote no. 5 of the 6 Democratic Socialist aldermen stuck with our grassroots movements and voted no. Unfortunately, one of our colleagues voted yes. There has now been an internal Chicago DSA accountability process, and the report of which will be coming out soon. I think that it's a challenge, and it definitely provided a challenge to our local chapter because we have to figure this out, right? We've never had so many elected officials in office. We've never had so many people with a stated commitment to co-govern or to engage in a dual power project, as it's sometimes called. Yeah. And so this is really a test case to see how do we hold our own accountable. I trust the members of the Chicago DSA to work through this democratic process and figure out how we make sure that when people break with our grassroots movement, they're held to account.
Is the fact that the Chicago City Council, the Board of Aldermen, I mean, that's your cute name for it, is nonpartisan, does that create some distance between you and your other socialists and the Democratic Party?
Well, yeah, that's interesting. The Democratic Party has really become more so like a corporate entity than like a party that's made up of like individual members. Each ward also has a Democratic and Republican committeeman. And for some time, because the Green Party got enough votes at the state level, each ward also elected a Green Party committeeman. In effect, those committeemen form the county party. And they're the ones that actually make the decisions and decide who is the county endorsed candidate. Most aldermen are also the Democratic committeemen, even when they're Republicans who vote for Trump and have Trump signs in their front lawns, as we had one alderman who's the Democratic committeeman and had that in his front lawn. So it's an interesting situation because most voters, so for example, in the Democratic primary in my ward, upwards of 63% of people voted for Bernie Sanders in the Democratic primary in my ward. And so I guess what I'm getting to is that the Democratic Party isn't this like disciplined united force where they can say, you know what, get out of the party. You're a Democratic Socialist. You're not a Democrat. I think that there are openings, particularly at the local level, as we saw in Nevada, right, where Bernie-crats or Democratic Socialists can enter the party and actually wield party within these loose party apparatuses.
Kylie, I'm curious, Carla says 1 is the loneliest number. And what's it like being a Bernie bro in the comedy world? You think, oh, it's California. California went for Bernie. Like, it's the liberal coast where all the crazy avocado things happen. And yet it seems like maybe your experience isn't that this kind of comedy is roundly accepted and embraced with open arms.
I think it's interesting because I would say that the kind of things that I believe in like 90% of the comedians I like interact with and like all of my friends believe the same thing. And so I think like on a personal level, it's not difficult at all. But I think in terms of like the broader sphere of like TV, late night and everything, and obviously I have no credits. I am simply online. But like, I think there is a general sort of like, let's just make fun of the Republicans. That's easy. That's what we do, as opposed to maybe the tougher thing, which is to make fun of systems. And I don't even think it's that tough. I think it's very simple. I feel like it's very simple to be able to be like, we can make fun of a system that is the richest nation in the world that doesn't give you healthcare. Like, I feel like people take things very personally, where it's like, well, we can't personally attack these politicians because they're like, quote unquote, the good guys. But it's like, I'm not necessarily making fun of Biden specifically or like a specific candidate. I'm making fun of the system at large. And so it is always curious to me when people are like, you can't say this yet. You have to wait until X person is elected or X person is elected. When it's really just like, I'm just making fun of the reality at large. I didn't even explicitly think it was political for like a while until I started being branded as such.
Yeah, it's weird to see, and I don't mean this kind of as a criticism of her, but sorry, the woman who got the Netflix show instantly from the Trump impersonations.
Yes.
Sorry, why am I blocking her name?
Yes, Sarah Cooper.
Sarah Cooper. So Sarah Cooper goes viral and immediately, you know, is rewarded with these kind of like structural Netflix-y, like, you know, she becomes a household name, is doing the circuit. And I'm not saying, I don't know what the comparative clicks are on your videos versus Sarah Cooper's videos. And I know that Trump is just a target that people love to hate, and you're going to get a certain amount of traction for that reason. But like the second I saw you, I was like, this is funny. I would like to syndicate this, please. Now, if we're just literally doing lip sync videos as television shows, I think that this is original content, actually.
I think it's interesting because I think there is, like, there's absolutely room for both, and I do think we serve very different purposes. I mean, I've messaged with her back and forth. She's, like, very nice. I think that she has been working very hard for a very long time, and it's paying off, and I think it's not undeserved at all. I mean, she found, like, a shtick that worked, and somehow it has become this, like, super politically loaded thing versus where it's like, is this inaction? Is this helping? Is this... When in reality, she is simply just mimicking the president's words. And I think it is very accessible in a way. Like, I think that people who are maybe on the border, and I don't know, maybe this is wishful thinking, maybe this is wishful Lincoln Project thinking, but that maybe people on the border can like sort of unite and be like, that's something to laugh at, where like I am saying very specific things that antagonize certain groups of people.
It's true.
And so
Yours
it's
is a more online referencing comedy.
It's a lot more niche. And so I could see how it would be tough for Netflix to be like, do we want this weird shit poster to like be on here? I mean Netflix, I'm available, but you know. Time will tell.
I'm curious if either or both of you saw that moment recently on the Jimmy Kimmel show with John Oliver that seemed to really highlight these gaps that are just, they're there. Like the gaps aren't new. They're big and they're prominent, but they very rarely sneak on to the mainstream media like this.
Alexa, how bad are Amazon working conditions?
Alexa, stop. Sure. Alexa, stop. Here we go. All right, I have to.
Alexa. Alexa, what is union
Alexa,
busting?
This is me time now. Alexa, stop. Stop, please. Alexa, please listen to me.
The panic on Jimmy's face.
What was that bit supposed to be?
I don't know.
Like, that seems like a straightforward bit. Like, I'm going to ask Alexa about union busting. Okay, that's a bit that makes sense. Pretty straightforward satire. Like, what was the Jimmy Fallon's idea of this bit?
I think they're going to ask it innocuous questions that had nothing to do with Amazon working conditions.
Yeah, I get it. And I get why, like, putting myself in their shoes, you want a home assistant that is a recognizable name. It's a little bit more recognizable than Google Home. It's a little bit punchier than Google Home, but you can't deny that there are certain associations with Alexa that are like really hard to ignore. And like, Jimmy Fallon is not going to stop Bezos by not doing this, but it is still like, it's a little weird. It's a little weird to not address it.
He's trying to get paid, right? And obviously this is an ad. This is, content that they're putting on there. And he's freaked out. Who knows? Maybe the contract says that he wasn't do anything to disparage. But now I'm just really curious, what actually does Alexa answer when you ask her what is union busting? And did Amazon change the answer after this aired?
I want to know.
That's a very good question. I confess to having a Google Home device. So
Oh, no.
I wonder what Google Home has to
Why?
say.
Why? What does it do?
why do I have a Google Home device?
I mean, what does it do? Do you talk to it?
It surveils her.
It does do that. I mean, I live
Yeah,
alone,
it's
so it gets to
surveilling
hear
you.
me watch 90 Day Fiancé. But I got it because I used to have a party every year, a big party for my birthday in New York. And every year, my little Sony music player would not get loud enough to like be louder than the voices in the room. And so I would go and buy a speaker from Best Buy and then usually return it after the party because they're very expensive and I could never decide what speaker I wanted. And then sometimes I would borrow my mom's speaker, but this one year I didn't have time to do it. And my brother convinced me, he was like the tech go-to person in the family, to get a Google Home device. And I really didn't want to do it, but I did it and I had every intention of returning it also. And then I just forgot.
Wait, so you just use it as a speaker?
Yeah, I mean, I ask it things like, okay, Google, what's the temperature like in DC today?
Oh, so you're doing other things with it. You're interacting with it.
I had an Echo. I will confess, I had an Echo Dot. I won it in a Facebook Live improv guessing game where I wasn't even in the show. They were like, the first person to comment the capital of whatever state gets this Echo Dot. And I'm like, sure. And they mailed me an Echo Dot. And I plugged it in. I had Amazon listen to my thoughts for probably a year. And all I used it for was rain sounds. For it to play rain sounds for me to go to bed to. And then I'm like, I can't do this. So I gave it away at an improv show of my own. And it was the circle of life.
Yeah, I feel like this is a terrible way to think. But my feeling is that they're gonna listen. They're listening through my phone. Mm-hmm. I had a friend of a friend who worked at, I think, Google. And she knew how to take the speaker things out of her phone like it was some technical thing.
Whoa.
And she did it. It's just like how all the surveillance people always have their cameras on their computer cover. Like the people in the know are very savvy and do the things. But I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. So if the government wants to blackmail me a la Martin Luther King or whatever, I'm just going to have to deal with the fact that they know my hair removal routines or whatever embarrassing thing is happening in this house. And, I'm not cheating on anybody or killing anybody. So for the most part, I think that they're limited in their options. I'm guarding against blackmail by being just decent.
Well, if you didn't have the devices, then you could cheat on whoever you want.
Well, if I feel so inclined, then I'll get rid of my Google Home.
But how would you set up those rendezvous? How would you even meet someone?
You need Google Home to set up your infidelity. Are you going to call someone?
What are they sending you a telegram? Meet me.
It's 2021. No. It's 2021. Yeah. We use our digital assistants to meet our lovers. It's what we got to do.
My future partner knows the second I get rid of the Google Home, they should be concerned.
Should we have prizes on this show?
So we can create more winners? The world needs more winners.
Yeah, I mean, no, I was just thinking about Kylie winning the Echo thing.
What giveaways do you want to have for the Bad Faith sweepstakes?
Well, we can give away your freaking Google Home device.
It's expensive.
Yeah, we got an extra one of these.
I do have a little mini one that I don't plug in, that I also got for free at a CBC weekend event hosted by Google.
If you keep doing that, you will simply just start doing the Jimmy Fallon bit, and then we'll be right back where we started.
Well, the thing about the bit, though, that I did want to say is I think that if a leftist had been planning the bit, I get the conceit. I get that it's funny to ask this robot things and it gives you quirky answers. I'm not a monster. I understand the humor. But I think if a leftist had been planning the bit, the same way John Oliver's immediate association with Alexa was Amazon, and what's the first association with Amazon right now? It's the Union Drive and Bessemer. We wouldn't have done it. We would have picked a different device. We would have just gone with an Echo, or we would have built in a joke about Amazon into the bit.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have just have glossed over our heads that we could pretend that this was like a sponsorship deal style bit that was going to be friendly to the product.
No, it's a difficult thing to get by. And I think it's people are so afraid to take overwhelmingly popular positions. Like, Amazon is evil is, I would say, a known baseline opinion that most people share. And so the hesitancy to go after it, I mean, I saw some people on Twitter claim that that bit was not sponsored, that it wasn't like under the table sponsored even, that it was just purely because of the name recognition. But I don't know. You never know. You never know what goes on.
I mean, I kind of believe when Jimmy says this isn't a planted bit. It's not like a sponsored bit per se, but it can also be the case that Amazon is the sponsor of your show, even if this bit wasn't placed. Do you know what I mean? And that you are worried about the consequences of doing a bit like that, or of being overly critical.
And of course, like, Amazon Video also exists, Amazon Prime, or whatever they call it, they're streaming. Like, that also exists. Like, there are corporate overlord consequences, like, everywhere you look. And I don't know whose parent company owns what. Like, you know, that's something, if I were the host of a show, maybe I'd panic too. I don't think I would. I don't think this would even happen in the first place. But
yeah, well, if he were to have leaned in, if Jimmy Fallon is thinking about doing a similar bit in the future, he could win a lot of fans. And this is the point that
he could lean in. I think people would genuinely like it. I don't mean to play Jimmy's advocate too much in this. I think he could have leaned in.
We would have loved it the same way that, you know, it's so refreshing to have any leftist in any mainstream sphere. I mean, I think that's why you resonate so much with so many people, Kylie, is like, it's just such a void. And it seems like such an opportunity for folks. There's a market. Like, I went on CNN like a month or two back, and people lost their mind just because it's like a recognizable leftist. It was like me and Liz Brunig. Recognizable leftist on cable news. Just the fact of us being there before we even opened our mouths was like a small media event in lefty circles. And it's like, there's an appetite. Why not take a bite?
It's shocking that, again, Medicare for all, universal healthcare, whatever, supported by 2/3 of the country. I feel like people are shocked when people share these opinions, or when those opinions are represented in a way that doesn't make sense to me. These are overwhelmingly popular policies. Why is that? And of course, I mean, it's corporations, it's 1% of whatever controlling everything. But
to be successful in this system, you have to internalize kind of like the neoliberal consensus and be well versed in being able to kind of adhere to what neoliberalism tells us is correct. So Jimmy Fallon's not an idiot, right? Like, he's gotten to where he's gotten because he knows how to deal with moneyed people, and he knows how to be funny in a way that doesn't, you know, challenge them or threaten them.
I don't think he knows how to be funny. Also, he might also be an idiot.
We've got our battle lines drawn here.
Well, you know, I mean, right on. I mean, I get what you're saying, but I just think this is a bad example for that.
Speaking of controversial punditry, we have another clip of things that went down in neoliberal land. I wanted to see what your guys' responses to this one was.
There's you were kind of funny, and they were testing you. Now, a few questions about this process. First of all, is it true that when you were having the test administered, you inhaled and the doctor's finger went all the way up your nose and got stuck and had to be released with a tool? Is that true? Just to deal with the record.
She wanted to comment that I have a little button nose, and she was afraid that the swab would actually hurt because it extended my nasal cavity.
You know what? I understand. This is the normal swab I'm holding up here now, and for everybody at home. Is it true that this was the swab that the nurse was actually using on you, and that at first it went into your nose and disappeared, so that in scale, this was the actual swab that was being used to fit up that double-barrel shotgun that you have mounted on the front of your pretty face?
So you see, Bree, there is leftist comedy on TV. I don't know what you're talking about.
That's the news.
That's the news. For listeners who aren't watching, that was Chris Cuomo interviewing his brother, a governor of New York who's embroiled in many a scandal at this point, doing some really high-end prop work with cotton swabs that get increasingly large, comically large, that they're the size of those batons that they used to use on American Gladiator to knock each other off of like podiums.
I've never seen this clip before. I cannot get over that they're doing prop comedy on CNN.
It's like those like Univision daytime comedy shows.
You don't know anything about Univision daytime comedy shows, Virgil. Don't put them in with some trash that you saw on CNN.
That's right, Carlos. Don't bring down the high-end comedy in other contexts with this Cuomo on Cuomo nonsense.
I know people have asked this before, but how can you just interview your own brother every freaking night on CNN?
It doesn't count.
That doesn't count. That's just you just hanging out with your brother. That's not news. I mean, I know normally it's not even news, but this just seems worse.
I mean, Carlos, Chicago gets a lot of crap as, a fundamentally corrupt city, but this seems to really rank up there with rank corruption.
It's nepotism. I mean, you know how Rahm got that 7-part special on CNN? It was his brother Ari Emanuel, the Hollywood producer. I'm sure he picks up the phone and says, hey, help my brother out. He's up for re-election. It's going to be a tough one. Give him a series on CNN. And then next thing you know, there's a puff piece every night on CNN, saying this is Rahm and how he's saving Chicago. So yeah, of course, it's who you know, and that's how the world works. And the great travesty is that we know that that's how rich people help each other. Like rich people have the clearest class consciousness. Like they will pick up the phone and be like, hey, my idiot son needs a job. Will you hire him at your firm? And they're like, I got you, buddy. But God forbid working poor people do that and try and help each other out.
So what we're saying is Kylie needed to have an uncle or an aunt at a major studio, and then I could have the Hulu show that I've been dreaming of.
I need my dad to be David Hulu, and then my name will be everywhere.
Okay, well, I had to get into that. I hope we're going to be able to have some guests that can speak to the underlying issues, both the nursing home scandal and all of the sexual harassment scandals that Cuomo's up against. But what was really remarkable is that as those things started to hit the fan over the last couple of months, they did ultimately have to address the fact that Cuomo's been interviewing Cuomo. And the response was, now that, my brother is in the mix of all of this, it would be inappropriate for me to be doing coverage of him. Therefore, I won't be covering him anymore. So there's no acknowledgement that it was wrong to have done it when Cuomo was America's hero, quote unquote, because of the COVID response. But now there's an appreciation. Oh, this would be awkward for us, so we're not going to do these interviews anymore.
And isn't that just another case of the cancel culture mob coming for comedians?
Yeah, for Chris Cuomo, noted stand-up comedian, canceled.
Speaking of cancel culture, I've been dying to talk about this. You can yell at me if you think this is too pop culture focused, but this was one of the most enjoyable cancel culture moments for me. Virgil and I, we did an episode a little while back where we talked about the Oprah royal family interview. I don't know if you guys have been following this. I'm seeing some nods from Kylie.
Oh, yeah.
Carlos, I know you're a busy man. You have a lot on your plate, but you're all over it.
I've seen the memes, I get my news from Instagram.
So I don't know if you guys watch. It's not actually The View. It's not the chat. The Talk. Sorry,
The Talk,
I should know what I'm talking about.
Is that the Meghan McCain one? No, that's The View.
No, that's The View. Mm-hmm. The Talk is the one with Sharon Osbourne principally.
Yes.
Elaine Welterworth, who was previously the editor-in-chief of Teen Vogue. Teen Vogue editor-in-chief being a whole other scandal that's going on in the world, but we'll put that to the side for now. And on a recent episode about a week ago, Sharon Osbourne got into a little bit of hot water as she defended Piers Morgan, who you may be aware is a big fan of the royal family and the crown, and consequently not such a big fan of Meghan Markle. And Sharon Osbourne said some words in defense of Piers Morgan as her friend, and the following ensued.
I feel even like I'm about to be put in the electric chair because I have a friend who many people think is a racist, so that makes me a racist. And for me, at 68 years of age, to have to turn around and say, I ain't racist. What's it got to do with me? How can I be racist about anybody? How can I be racist about anybody or anything in my life? How can I?
Well, I tell you,
what?
We'll be right back.
What?
We have more topics, so don't go away.
And I think we should stop this.
We'll be right back.
So the thing is that woman, I'm sorry, what is her name? The black woman, Sharon, I forget her name. She was so graceful with Sharon in a way that she really did not need to be. There's a part that comes after this, when they come back after the break, where Sharon says, "Don't you dare cry. If anyone has the right to cry right now, it's me." It's like textbook how not to respond to the conversation about racism as the person who is literally not being aggrieved.
It's so shocking. It's so, I mean, it's not shocking, but it is shocking. I mean, I just love the line, how can I, at 68 years old, be racist? When it's like, how can you not be? What?
Excuse me, I'm a boomer? I don't know.
Not all white women, Kylie.
What?
Wait, so at the root of this is she's friends with Piers Morgan?
Yeah, so, Piers has been running around saying, we talked about this, Virgil. It seems like he hung out with Meghan Markle once, and he maybe thought it was a date, and then he introduced her to the prince, and then he feels like Prince Harry stole his shot.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's a story, because if you really read between the lines, it wasn't even a date. Like, he bought her a few rounds of drinks, and then she gracefully made an exit. It was not a date. This man thinks it was a date. It was not a date.
It's huge beta behavior, obviously.
Right. So now he's super irritated because he's a man slighted, a man scorned. Mm-hmm. And Sharon said something along the lines of, like, she tweeted a defense of him, like, Piers Morgan is my friend. And apparently it came up on the show, and, some of the other hosts were like, well, I think that what Piers Morgan has been saying is either racist or racial or somehow racially motivated, his comments about Meghan Markle. And then Sharon Osbourne jumped to, I feel like you're telling me that I'm in an electric chair. I feel like I'm in an electric chair being accused of racism by proxy. And it's like, no one even accused you of anything. They said your friend is maybe racist. So can we have a conversation about what it means for you to be defending his substantive remarks in this moment?
Yeah, they hadn't even thrown that her way yet, but it was like, she didn't need to be in this story at all. I feel like everyone had bigger fish to fry. Everyone was canceling the Queen. Like, we're not thinking about you, Sharon Osbourne, but you made yourself the center of the story, and now we have to go, well, yeah, you probably are a little racist.
It's like the people who project themselves onto the folks you're making fun of in your bits.
Like, how dare you?
So moments like this, they do make me a little panicky about how far we need to go as a country, because I feel like this discourse is very 2008. Like, a story like this would have, like, thrilled me to no end and been like my entire political consciousness in 2008. And explaining to everyone exactly why Sharon Osbourne is wrong would be tantamount to, like, that would have been my Selma.
Jesus.
I mean, that's where the discourse was. I mean, do you remember, like, Virgil, Carlos, I mean, Kylie, I don't know. In 2008,
I was 11.
learning
It's okay.
multiplication tables and but like,
She was reading picture books about Barack Obama.
Yeah, I was going, he seems pretty cool. Okay. Gonna go to third period and sweat.
Right. That's where we were. I used to read all these blogs by people I like the Francesca Ramseys of the world were doing the hard and much needed work of just, like, basically explaining the most rudimentary concepts in the world to the broader, like, largely white liberal public. Like, this is why maybe you should ask people before you stick your hand in their afro. Like, it was like that was the level of discourse. And now I think a lot of the left is really over it because we have bigger fish to fry and we're concerned with all of these broader economic issues and understanding that structural racism is more than all of this interpersonal stuff about, the person who works with me at my law firm said something rude and it's hurtful, but that's, like, not necessarily our focus in a political realm. But this moment really took me back and made me question whether I've been too quick to scoff at the need for the kind of white fragility books. Sharon Osbourne maybe needs to go back to 2008 and read some literature.
Yeah, but does she read the book and she stops being an asshole? So I think you read the book and you still have the same underlying, bad personality traits. And
but now you just have the vocabulary to defend yourself.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
No, that's exactly it. Like, you haven't really done any kind of growth or change. You're just going to still be a jerk about other things.
You're saying she becomes a performative woke activist?
Yeah.
Where she'll just be like an egomaniac and like calling people out, but like will still be horrid to people of color. Damn.
What's funny is that there are people on the left who read White Fragility and had a big problem with. There's a moment in the book where they describe this very phenomenon, right, where someone says something was racist, and the person who's being accused of racism or implicated in the racism starts to cry and make it about having to coddle them and their feelings as opposed to the actual aggrieved person. And some folks on the left were like, "This is so stupid. They're telling white women they don't have permission to cry. If you have feelings, of course, everybody's entitled to their feelings." And it seemed like even there were parts of the left who didn't understand this phenomenon that was illustrated so perfectly here, that it's not like sincere tears as a kind of weaponization of, sorry to say it, white fragility, to try to distract from the underlying point, which you can agree or disagree with, but they never were able to get to a substantive conversation about whether or not what Piers Morgan said was racist and whether or not Sharon Osbourne was giving cover to it through her tweets.
Yeah, it's this white woman panic where we go, that couldn't possibly be me. Yeah, it's very true. People just sort of like, they turn on the waterworks, not even consciously. I don't even know if it's like, I am now going to invalidate, but like, it's this response that just doesn't need to happen, that we could not do that. We can not make it about us, but we're white women. We're going to make it about us. And it's horrible.
I mean, how's your accent, Kylie? Because I feel like there's material there as well.
Electric chair. That's going to be the whole video.
Okay, we should do a little bit of a more serious one. People are looking to us for political guidance in these tough times. I don't want to fool around too much around here. We've been talking about on the show a lot about the COVID relief bill, what made it through, what didn't make it through, and the politics around $15 minimum wage not making it. And there's obviously, again, here's a theme, a pretty significant gap between the way these issues are talked about in the left media versus in the mainstream media. Ben, can we do the Saki on the stimulus clip?
President Biden, Vice President Harris, and other high-profile surrogates are traveling again this week to promote the coronavirus relief law, which included $1,400 checks for low- and middle-income Americans. We know some progressive Democrats have pushed for recurring payments, not just a one-time payment of $1,400, but more. And there is this idea of a fourth round of stimulus checks making headlines in local and some national outlets. Is the White House considering something like that, a fourth stimulus?
Well, we're obviously going to look at the economic data and what the needs are. And what the president's focused on now is figuring out what's next as a part of his Build Back Better agenda. It's no secret that's going to be about jobs. He's having policy discussions through the course of the next several days and weeks, and I expect he'll have more to convey on what's next soon.
Bad faith sweepstakes. Who can tell me what she just said?
She said it's no secret that he cares about jobs, you know?
Jobs, pivot.
The question was, are there going to be recurring stimulus checks, or is there going to be a fourth round?
I think she said maybe, but she said nothing at the same time.
It's kind of skillful. It's kind of skillful. I was never any good at that. If there wasn't an answer, as press secretary, if there wasn't an answer that I knew, or the very rare occasion that I feel like Bernie's answer wasn't what people wanted to hear, I sometimes messed up by just saying the true thing. Or I said that Bloomberg had a heart attack and got in a lot of trouble. It was 2 stents. Why are they putting in stents if it's not a heart attack? I'm sorry. It was an accident. Mea culpa. I apologize.
Honestly, potato. If the man's putting in stents, he's had a heart attack. He's just lying to us.
When that fiasco happened, not one reporter that I know actually just asked Bloomberg, have you had a heart attack?
Wow.
Right? Like, the big story is, Bernie, National Press Secretary, casts aspersions, lies about whether Bloomberg has had a heart attack. And it's not liable if it's true.
It's just a question, if it's just something that happened. It also isn't defamation. Old men have heart attacks. That's...
Right. And also, obviously, I said it by accident. Like, I misread stents for heart attack because it's like the logical conclusion, an astronaut's helmet came off and he was floating in space. And I go on the news and say, astronaut died today. And you're like, you don't know that he died. He's just floating in the vacuum of space without a helmet on.
We don't know that.
I'm sorry, you're right. I'm going to wait for confirmation from the moon or whatever. Carlos, I'm curious, in your district, how is the stimulus being perceived? Is there pressure or any blowback for some of these bigger structural elements, namely the $15 minimum wage, not making it through?
You know, I think there's definitely a lot of disappointment that 15 hasn't made it through. It's a little different here in the city of Chicago because we already passed an ordinance to get us to 15. However, there's a lot of cities across the state of Illinois, a lot of districts that do not have 15 and do not have a pathway to get to 15. I think a lot of people are not aware about the assistance to children that was included in the stimulus. And I think once we begin to see that roll out, I think people will be pleasantly surprised. And of course, there's just always the excitement around, getting that stimulus check and ways in which we as a community can sort of redistribute that money. Because there were some people that received the stimulus check that feel that they don't need it. And so they're talking about, how do I support mutual aid? How do I, support undocumented neighbors that might not have necessarily received the stimulus check, or homeless neighbors who might have difficulty getting that support and that check from the IRS. I think generally the response to the recent round of COVID money has been extremely positive. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't point out the fact that we need more and that we're going to continue to need more government assistance and programs to really address poverty. But at the same time, I do think that it's a step in the right direction and people see it as that.
Do you see what's going on with this the rogue socialist city council person who's not maintaining the block? Do you see any parallels with how you're able to wield power locally on the city council and the understanding that you can operate in tandem and get things done with the choices that are being made by the squad in Congress? In particular, this conversation about whether or not they should be acting as a block to either hold up the COVID bill for things like a $15 minimum wage when you have these must-pass bills, or to hold up the vote for Nancy Pelosi in order to get hearings and a vote on Medicare for all these kinds of things. Has your experience on the city council given you any insight into what you think might be going on in Congress?
It's difficult because, locally, I know very clearly, okay, these are the local leaders that are fighting for these specific issues. These are the aldermen that we can push. This is how much leverage we have. And we try and figure out that inside-outside strategy, right? Who are the main community groups that are pushing for a specific thing? And how can I use my position as an alderman on the inside to get them intel so that they can better form their grassroots demands? They can better form their grassroots campaign. And then we can do that 1-2 punch where they're pushing on the outside and we're using our legislative tricks internally. Sometimes you use your legislative tricks, so to speak, but you use your legislative tools to make a point. Sometimes you just want to make a point, and sometimes that's what the organizers on the outside want as well. There was a campaign my first term to ask that Rahm Emanuel not spend $100 million on a new shooting range and swimming pool for cops, but instead invest that money on the west side of the city of Chicago. And it was called the No Cop Academy campaign. We already have a police academy. We don't need a new facility being built. And I was the only alderman to cast a no vote. And I used a legislative tool at my disposal, which in our city council we call defer and publish, where I was able to kick the vote back several days. In the end, we only got one additional other alderman to vote no with me. And so a lot of people were like, why did you do that? You didn't win anything. It was pointless. All you did was force the city council to meet again. But that was a coordinated decision that was made with the grassroots. It wasn't me acting alone, right? There was a broader movement that I was being responsive to. Sometimes movements or people that are organizing have come and made asks of me to be more controversial, but I haven't really felt like the grassroots support was there. So it's really just a matter, because we don't have a workers' party, because we kind of don't have a clearinghouse where all of this organizing work exists under one roof and we can coordinate under that one roof. It's kind of like a hodgepodge, right? So I'm sure that the members of Congress find themselves in a similar position where sometimes they're going to turn to certain activists on a certain issue and commiserate with them in terms of what the strategy should be. Sometimes they're going to turn to other activists. And so I think it's really kind of just figuring out who really represents kind of that grassroots swell and who has the long-term support and strategy to continue pushing on this issue and work with them to advance that matter.
I mean, that's become a theme. We heard Chris Hedges last week say basically the same thing. It's the make me do it line. I think the absence of, I've said this a million times at this point, but the absence of, organized labor, the absence of the kind of extra political leadership, outside of political leadership that has existed in times past has made people put perhaps undue focus or have undue expectations of the squad to fill in and be those leaders. And I think that they could inspire a level of movement energy if they wanted to. But there are obviously competing pressures for an elected official that don't exist for an outside organizer. And so I understand why people keep looking to them in the absence of others. But also, in all likelihood, you're going to have this mix of organizers and musicians and artists the way that we used to have in yesteryear, who could really stoke the kind of public sentiments and the kind of public engagement and levels of protest and activism that we've had in years past, which is to say more front-facing camera videos.
And I would say, look, Bernie, to his credit, I mean, look, the House did what it needed to do. It included 15 in the bill. Ultimately, it was the Senate that failed us, but our champion Bernie made those Democrats take that tough vote. And now we know who were the Democrats that didn't want to include that bill. So it's not like, you know, they went to Bernie and were like, look, the parliamentarian doesn't want 15 in the bill. Biden doesn't really want 15 in the bill. Manchin, you know, saying no. And Bernie was like, okay, I got your back. Don't worry about it. We'll work on it later. Instead, that's my best Bernie.
That's really good.
Pretty good.
Yeah. But instead he was like, fuck that. We're going to fight for 15. I'm going to, you know, put the amendment forward. I think he did exactly what the movement needed him to do in that second. And I will also say, you know, in the House, it was in the bill. And so at the same time, you don't always want to be going to the nuclear option. Right. And so it's really figuring out, it's like any campaign. You want to know when to escalate there, and you want to have a clear strategy about when you escalate there. And there has to be buy-in from all the parties involved in that coordinated action.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we went over this on the last episode, so I don't want to linger too long. But the question is, Bernie did his best, ostensibly, or he at least fought insofar as bringing the vote on whether or not to re-include $15 in the bill. But that kind of obscures, you know, focusing on that obscures the extent to which, if Chuck Schumer hadn't taken it out of the bill to begin with, which he didn't have to do, just because the parliamentarian rules doesn't mean it like magically just disappears out of the bill. That was a choice from the Biden administration to do that. If he had kept it in, it would have been incumbent on a conservative or a moderate Democrat to bring an amendment to take it out of the bill, and that would have required 60 votes. So they basically orchestrated a posture where they turned a 51-vote situation into a 60-vote situation that would make it impossible to put it back in, as opposed to making it impossible to take it out, right? And then ultimately we would have had a vote on a $15 minimum wage instead of a vote on whether or not to put a $15 minimum wage back in the bill. And that posture is very different for someone like Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, who we all know are from states where everyone supports $15 minimum wage. How do I know that? Because in every state, they support a $15 minimum wage.
Because it's all of them.
It's all of them. Thank you both so much for joining us today. Where can people find you, Kylie, find your work, and see more of you?
You can follow me at Deadeye Brakeman on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, and any other updates or plugs you'll see from there.
And Carlos, where can people find you and support any efforts that you might be championing right now?
You can follow me on Twitter at CD as in Daniel Rosa, and you can visit my website, carlosrosa.org.
Awesome. Thank you both. This has been fun.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Bye-bye.